So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Detroit Lions video. The Detroit Lions are back in action after having a bye week away. The 6-2 Detroit Lions are set to take on the 4-4 LA Chargers on Sunday Night Football for a chance to improve their record, either for the Chargers to get above 500 for the first time this season or for the Detroit Lions to extend their lead in the NFC North. And a primetime matchup between two very talented teams and two teams that we thought could be playoff contenders at the beginning of the season. The Lions and the Chargers are going to clash on Sunday Night Football. And today we're going to go over the entire matchup. We're going to go over all the matchups that we're going to see within the game. And we're going to talk about how this game should shape out and who will or should eventually come out as the winner of Sunday Night Football. So with that being said, let's get right on into taking a look at these two teams, starting off with the Detroit Lions. The Lions have been a great offense and a good defense for a majority of the season, with a couple outliers here and there on the defensive side of the ball, and really one major statistical outlier in Baltimore. The Detroit Lions have been a top offensive and defensive unit for the better part of the year. The Lions currently rank as the 6th passing offense in the NFL. They rank as the 6th rushing offense in the NFL, as well as ranking as the 9th best offense as far as points scored per game. They are easily a top 10 offense in the NFL, and I think under the right circumstances, they could even finish as high as a top 5 offense in the NFL. They really haven't been fully healthy for a majority of the season, with either David Montgomery missing time, Jahmyr Gibbs missing time, the offensive line missing some key starters or key players, as well as the wide receiver room taking a couple beatings as well, with Amon-Ra missing a game and a couple other receivers being banged up for the start of the NFL season. The offense has never really been at full strength, and I don't think that the offense really has never been at full strength at any point throughout their 8 games this season, but that could very well change after their bye week, as it seems like David Montgomery is ready to come back healthy. It seems as though both Jonah Jackson and Frank Ragnow are ready to are prepared and ready to return to the starting offensive line. And it does seem as though most, if not all, of the Detroit Lions starting offensive weapons will be healthy for this game on Sunday night as well. Moving on to the defensive side of the ball, they've been a good but not a great unit this year. They've had some games where they've held opponents to under 1 total touchdown in the game. Obviously, opponents like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons failed to score even a touchdown. But then you have games like the Baltimore Ravens and the Seattle Seahawks where 30 plus have been put up on the Detroit Lions. It's getting a lot of give and take, either a very good, very strong defensive performance or a very underwhelming and poor defensive performance, leaves the Detroit Lions almost dead center in the league as the 15th ranked passing offense and the 15th ranked scoring defense, but they are an elite run defense. That line may not be getting a ton of sacks, but they are getting a lot of pressures, and they are stopping the run better than almost anybody in football. They have a really strong defense, and a lot of it comes from the fact that a lot of teams can't run the ball on them, so they pass the ball a lot more than the average team. That, of course, leads to the average to slightly above average passing defense, and the scoring defense is right around middle of the NFL as well. Now, the Chargers have been kind of an up and down team this year. They lost their first 2 games and won their next 2. They lost 2 after that, and they're on a 2-game winning streak. So they've been very hot and very cold at points during the season. And I think their statistics really reflect that, as the Chargers rank as the 11th best passing offense in the NFL. Obviously, Justin Herbert is a great quarterback, throwing to a great elite wide receiver in Keenan Allen, but they are just the 21st rushing offense in the NFL, with injuries along the offensive line and injuries to the running back room. But they still rank top 10 in the NFL as the 8th best scoring offense, averaging just 0.1 points per game more than the Detroit Lions. The Detroit Lions are averaging 25 points per game, and the Los Angeles Chargers are averaging 25.1 points per game. So they are almost dead even when it comes to points scored, but the Lions are a far more efficient offense as far as moving the ball down the field and putting the ball in position to score points in the red zone. Now, moving on to the defensive side of the ball, the Chargers are elite on one end and they are very poor on the other. They rank 32nd in the NFL in passing defense right now, but they rank 6th, top 10 in the NFL in rushing defense. They stop the run very, very well. They force third downs. They force long and difficult situations. But when it comes to pass protection, when it comes to, their defense versus the pass, they really haven't been able to step up to the plate, ranking 32nd, dead last in the NFL, a spot where the Detroit Lions were just a year ago, and they rank as just the 21st scoring defense in the NFL. So they stop the run well on early downs, but their poor passing defense allows a lot of teams to reach the red zone, and their poor passing defense allows a lot of points to be put up on a Chargers secondary that is actually quite talented, just might not be the most well-coached unit on the field. Now, it is important to note that the Detroit Lions are coming off of a bye week, meaning they will have upwards of 14 days of preparation, including a late start on Sunday to prepare for the Los Angeles Chargers. That means they should be rested, they should be prepared, and they should have a much better game plan going into it than, say, the Los Angeles Chargers, who are technically on a short week after playing Monday Night Football versus the New York Jets. They played a very good game, a very strong defensive battle, but they are on a short week, having just 6 days to prepare as opposed to the Detroit Lions 14. Now, they do get a little bit of extra rest as they're not playing at 1 o'clock or 4:25, so they have almost a full week to prepare. However, that extra day off and that extra day less to prepare, that one less day, could be very impactful for the Chargers only having 6 days to game plan as opposed, again, to the Lions 14. Now, taking a look at some of the matchups we're going to see in this game, I think the Detroit Lions match up really well on the offensive side of the ball. Although the Chargers have had games with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sacks, I do think the Detroit Lions offensive line will match up really well against the Chargers defensive line. The interior really doesn't bother me too much from the Chargers. Their interior defensive line isn't great. And of course, with Frank Ragnow and Jonah Jackson coming back healthy, with Graham Glasgow filling back in at the right guard position, I think our interior offensive line is going to be really strong and hold up well, while the offensive tackles have been battle tested this year. They've gone up against some really good pass rushers, and they've pretty much held them to very minimal production. Just a week ago, or just 2 weeks ago at this point, the last time the Detroit Lions played, we saw Penei Sewell essentially shut out Max Crosby for the worst game of the season this year by the NFL's leading pressuring pass rusher, right? Max Crosby leads the NFL in pressures, but had a yearly low, had a season low, just 4 pressures against the Lions, with only one of those pressures coming against Penei Sewell. So if it's Penei Sewell versus Joey Bosa, I think Penei Sewell has the slight advantage. And then, of course, Khalil Mack is a very good pass rusher as well, had 6 sacks in one game, but again, his stats are a little bit skewed because of those 6 sacks in one game. He has one game with 6 sacks, he has one game with 2 sacks, and one game with just a single sack. And the other 5 games he's played this year, he has been shut out entirely. Him and Taylor Decker should be able to go back and forth all day. Taylor Decker, of course, having to block him a lot after his time in Chicago. And I do think the offensive line stacks up really well versus a Chargers pass rush that's coming off a game where they had, I believe, 6 or 7 sacks versus the New York Jets offensive line. Now, defensive backs versus wide receivers, I will give to the wide receivers because of the fact that the Chargers are the worst ranking pass defense in the NFL. And that obviously means that their cornerbacks, their defensive backs aren't playing very well, right? Amon-Ra St. Brown is a great wide receiver. Jameson Williams is an explosive wide receiver that can take the top off of a defense if you're not prepared. Khalif Raymond is a great wide receiver. Josh Reynolds is a really good wide receiver. And they just added Donovan Peoples-Jones, a guy that last year had almost 900 receiving yards for the Cleveland Browns, with Jacoby Brissett being the primary quarterback for most of the season. The Lions wide receiving core has been pretty good all year, and it just got an upgrade with Donovan Peoples-Jones at the trade deadline. Running back, I think, is really close. I actually really like the Chargers linebacking core. I think Kenneth Murray is pretty solid, and obviously Eric Kendricks is a former division rival who's been very good in the NFL for a long time, but I will give the slight advantage to a healthy David Montgomery and a on-fire Jahmyr Gibbs. Jahmyr Gibbs has over 130 total scrimmage yards over the last 2 games. He's averaging over 130 scrimmage yards over the last 2 games. He has over 300 scrimmage yards in the last 2 games combined, including 2 touchdowns in 2 days of rushing over 100 yards. Jahmyr Gibbs has been great, and now they're welcoming back the bowling ball and the engine of this Ben Johnson offense, that, of course, being David Montgomery, a player that could realistically see 25 to 30 carries and potentially see a lot of goal line work, a lot of short yardage work, and a lot of red zone work. Jahmyr Gibbs is going to gas them out in the fields in between the 20s, and David Montgomery is going to go to work in the red zone and get the football in the end zone, an area where the Detroit Lions have really struggled as of the last couple of weeks. However, I will give the slight edge to the Chargers when it comes to their safeties versus our tight ends. Derwin James, I still believe, is very easily a top 5 safety in the NFL. And even though Sam Laporta is a great young rookie tight end, I think that if he is matched up versus Derwin James, I do think Derwin James will win that matchup more times than he will lose. However, taking a look at some of the coaching stuff and some of the other things outside of talent, I do believe that the Lions coaching staff is significantly better than the Chargers one. I think that Dan Campbell is potentially the favorite right now for NFL Coach of the Year. Ben Johnson is probably the favorite for best offensive coordinator this year and will likely have any job of his choosing in the offseason. And even though Aaron Glenn has been streaky, he's been hot, and he's been cold, he has led the Detroit Lions to quite a few defensive victories. Again, games like the Falcons where they gave up just 6 points, games like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers where they gave up just 6 points, or even their last outing where they gave up just 150 total yards and just 7 points on defense to the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, taking a look on the other side of the ball, I think the Chargers match up a little bit better on offense, but not a whole lot better. I think the Lions defensive line should be able to take advantage of the Chargers' not great offensive line, right? They've allowed Justin Herbert to get hit a lot this year, and even going back a week ago, the Jets had 5 sacks versus this Chargers offensive line. Aiden Hutchinson should have a good day. Aleem McNeil should have a good day on the interior, and hopefully they can bring a couple other pass rushers. Hopefully Julian Okwara can get some reps and get some pressures in, and they should be able to pressure and sack Justin Herbert at least a couple of times. They're coming off of a 6-sack game on the last Monday Night Football that they played versus the Raiders, and the Raiders don't have a bad offensive line, but they don't have a great offensive line. I think it's actually pretty similar to what the Chargers have. And they came in with 6 sacks on Jimmy Garoppolo, so the Lions should be able to at least get some pressure and at least get some hits on the superstar quarterback. Now, I think the wide receivers are better than the Detroit Lions defensive backs. I know that Mike Williams is injured. I know that it's really just Keenan Allen at this point, and they're waiting for Quentin Johnston to really break out after being a first-round pick from TCU. But even just with Keenan Allen, I do think they're going to have a slight advantage, right? Keenan Allen is an elite wide receiver. We've seen Keenan Allen have elite days and elite games, and we've seen him really truly take over a football game, including the last time the Chargers actually played the Detroit Lions. He had a phenomenal day on Darius Slay, and even though Darius Slay came up with the game-winning pick in the end, Keenan Allen ripped this secondary apart the last time that they played, and I do think that Keenan Allen very well could have a big day again. The Lions have good defensive backs. Obviously, Jerry Jacobs is playing well. Cam Sutton's playing very well, but Keenan Allen is a veteran. He's an elite wide receiver, and I think he could potentially take advantage of this secondary with better quarterback play in the same way that Devontae Adams really did on Monday Night Football. Running back versus linebackers, I'll give the slight edge to the running backs of the Chargers. I think that Alex Anzalone and even going down to Jack Campbell and Derek Barnes are very good linebackers. They're playing very good football, but at the end of the day, Austin Eckler is a very, very talented running back, and I think he is going to win a lot of battles on the Sunday Night Football. But I do think the opposite is true for the Detroit Lions safeties versus the tight ends. Just as Derwin James matches up better versus Sam Laporta, I think Kirby Joseph and Tracy Walker match up pretty well versus Gerald Everett. Gerald Everett is a good tight end in my opinion, but I do think our safety should be able to take him away for the most part, as well as our linebackers should be able to match up really well. I think the Chargers have more talent than their record would show. I think they are a very talented football team. I would argue they are maybe a top 10 football team on paper in terms of superstar talent, but I think their coaching is really holding them back. And in a game between two very talented teams, it often is going to come down to the coaching ability of both squads. And as of right now, the Detroit Lions have a better coaching staff. But as I said, underestimating the Chargers is a very dangerous game because they have superstars like Joey Bosa and Justin Herbert and Keenan Allen and Rashawn Slater at left tackle and Derwin James and Asante Samuel Jr. They are an incredibly talented group, but they haven't quite lived up to their hype. They haven't quite lived up to what their on-paper talent would tell you that they are, which is why I think the Lions have a good chance of winning this Sunday night matchup. Now, keys to the game for both sides. For the Detroit Lions, I think they have to stay on pace. I think they have to be consistent in the passing game. I think Jared Goff has to have a really strong day, and they have to capitalize in the red zone. They cannot stall 4 or 5 times like they did versus the Las Vegas Raiders, right? That's why that game was so close. Despite the Detroit Lions having almost 300 more total yards, despite them having several more red zone drives, they only won that game by 12 points because they had a couple turnovers, because they weren't able to capitalize in the red zone. They settled for field goals 5 different times in that game, and they had 3 turnovers, 4 if you want to include a turnover on downs. Their offense had a lot of spurts. Their offense had a lot of good moments, but they also had just as many bad moments that kept the game close. If the Chargers want to win this game, they're going to have to play a defense kind of like what the Raiders did on Monday night. They're going to have to bend, not break. They're going to have to lean on Keenan Allen offensively, just like Devontae Adams was able to get open several times versus the Lions secondary. Keenan Allen's going to have that kind of game as well, and Justin Herbert's going to have to hit him in stride. Mack and Bosa are going to have a game. They're going to have to keep Jared Goff contained. They're going to have to get Jared Goff on the ground, keep him under pressure, because Jared Goff, despite being better this year under pressure, still isn't an elite quarterback when you get in his face. He still panics sometimes. He still throws some ill-advised balls, and he still does sometimes struggle with pressure in his face. So if Mack and Bosa can do that, they're going to be able to contain the Detroit Lions offense, at least from the passing attack, and we know how good they are versus the rushing attack. So overall, I think that both teams have a very good chance to win this game. I think this game could realistically go either way, and hopefully it goes the Detroit Lions' way. But as far as the final score actually goes, I think the Detroit Lions are going to win this game in a very close game at home. I think a 28-25 victory, with the Detroit Lions taking potentially a game-winning field goal over the Los Angeles Chargers to drop them back below 500, to put the Detroit Lions at 7-2 on the season and really take more control of the NFC North than they have right now. I think the Detroit Lions will walk out 7-2 victors coming off the bye week. The biggest reasons, I think coaching is going to play a big part in this game, and I trust Dan Campbell and the coaching staff to outcoach Brandon Staley and the Chargers. I think rest and preparation is going to be a big part of this game, while the Detroit Lions have nearly twice as much time to prepare and heal as the Los Angeles Chargers. If you look at it on paper and you compare the two teams, I think they're very similar talent-wise. So I don't think talent is going to be the big reason why one team wins and one team loses. So you have to look at a lot of the other outside factors, and as of right now, all of those factors outside of really home field advantage are leaning towards the Detroit Lions. And even then, the Detroit Lions have traveled really well this year, so I do expect the Lions crowd to be pretty big. I expect it to be maybe even potentially more of a home game for the Lions than it is for the Los Angeles Chargers. But that aspect, of course, is unable to be told until we actually see the games being played. So with that being said, I think the Lions take a close victory this week. A lot of people are underestimating the Chargers. A lot of Lions fans are saying this is an easy, automatic victory. I don't think that's necessarily true, but I do think the Lions will walk out with a hard-fought victory, a close victory versus a super talented team, and potentially be 2 for 2 in back-to-back weeks of getting a head coach maybe fired for their inability to coach talent up to its full ceiling. But with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below how you feel about this Chargers matchup. Do you think the Lions are going to win this game? Do you think the Lions are going to fall and stumble coming out of the bye week, making the race for the NFC North just that little bit closer? I'd be very curious what you guys have to say. But with all that being said, that is all for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go Lions.